53021 and 53022. Thank you, Ms. Kudron. All right, we're back with all of our same parties and participants for the afternoon portion of today's hearing. Mr. Kesselberg.
Your Honor, we call Jeremy Brewer.
Not sure what the stands.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Just step.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Could you state your name and spell it for the record?
Jeremy Brewer, Jeremy, last is Brewer.
And Mr. Brewer, where are you employed?
I'm currently employed by the Michigan Department of State Police,
And how long have you been with the state police?
25 years.
So I don't want to go through your whole career, but what is your current position?
I'm currently assigned to a drug supervisor in a narcotics unit in the city of Flint, the Flint Area Narcotics Group.
Prior to your assignment there as a lieutenant, where were you? What was your job?
My previous assignment, I was the assistant section commander at the 1st District Special Investigation Section for approximately 7 years.
And I know we keep going back, but right before that, what did you do?
Prior to that, I was a detective sergeant on the same unit for about 3 years.
So just so the court understands, with the Michigan State Police, Michigan State Police is broken up into districts, right?
Correct.
Now, what district are we in?
Currently, we're in the 1st District.
1st District, and we were in the 1st District back when you were employed at the Special Operations Place.
Yes.
And so as a detective sergeant in that unit, what did you do?
We were in charge. We had 9 counties in our district, and Lenawee being one of them. And so we were assigned several different types of cases, a lot of which are more high-profile cases, officer-involved shootings, cold case homicides, public corruption, things of that nature.
So fair to say you were a specialized detective that worked in a district depending on what was happening.
Correct.
So would you also provide support to local units?
Yes.
Including local state police posts?
Absolutely, yes.
And at some point you were assigned the Skelton case.
Correct.
Do you remember when that was?
I was in the late fall of 2013.
So when you were assigned to this case, to the Skelton case, I can imagine a bunch of files were turned over to you.
Correct.
You describe that.
Sure. Once Chief Weeks and the Rensselaer Police Department decided to turn this officially over to the state police, we set up a date and time for them to officially turn over all items of evidence and property to us, including all case files, evidentiary items. And so we set up a date and time to pick that up, and then that was transferred over to my office in Lansing, and it was at that time that I started to digesting it into the case.
Okay. How many files? Any idea?
I mean,
Voluminous?
thousands and thousands of documentation. Again, upwards of maybe 100 pieces of property, approximately. And then we also had things such as prison correspondence and prison phone call databases and tips. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of boxes of paperwork.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Yes, sir.
So I know that, Judge, can you see that?
I can see it. It's just a little small.
Judge, I have it on an 8.5 by 11. I can't read it. It's so small, but if you would like, you're welcome to try to look at this.
That looks like it may not be useful.
Would you like for us to move it closer to you?
I mean, if you want to.
It's up to you.
Well, try in the middle so that he and I can both see it.
Sure.
Sure.
There we go. Just make sure that you can see your witness. Read about it. You still reading?
I think I'll be okay.
Okay,
Can you see me?
Yes.
okay.
If you need to move, if you need to take a break,
Okay.
let me know. Now, some of this is going to be repetitive, but I don't know how else to present this to the court other than you kind of going through what you learned
Sure.
in your review of this case. Really, what I want you to do is show the court the information that you had to go through to get to the point where you could actually start your investigation.
Okay.
So I'll stop you if I think there's things we need to add, but if you could please tell the court about, let me back up one more thing. So as part of these case files being turned over to you, there was a somewhat of a timeline. Correct. And this timeline was probably made by the Federal Bureau of Investigation with input from other agencies, but you took that timeline and you created a more detailed timeline. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Not only did you recreate part of their timeline, but you also filled in up to present day.
Yes, sir.
So could you start and please tell the court what you went through?
So in preparing myself to get a better understanding of this case, this timeline was created. It essentially is more of a Reader's Digest version of all the, I guess we call them case highlights of the things that happened before I took the case over. And so we put this together just so we'd have a pretty concise document that we could reference for some dates and some times. A lot of the things that I'm going to be going through aren't a full detailed, isn't all the information relating to that specific tip or that specific internet search. It's just, again, highlights more for me,
Right.
and for the court, for the prosecutor's office to reference if need be.
Okay.
So it started off basically September 8th in 2010. Some of the information leading up into what happened on that Thanksgiving Day. John had called Tanya initially he wanted to move to Jacksonville, Florida. Tanya did not want to make that move. On September 13th of 2010, John Skelton left. Took all three boys to Florida. He was told he'd be charged with parental kidnapping, and he then returned to Morenci shortly thereafter. He still left for Florida with Alexander and Andrew. September 15th of 2010, Judge Noe signed an ex parte motion giving Tanya exclusive parental rights of the Skelton children. September 20th, after driving to Florida with Tanner, Tanya escorts John back to Morenci with Alexander and Andrew. September 21st, 2010, Judge Cole in Duval County, Florida, orders John and Tanya to return to Michigan with the boys. Moving forward to October 30th, 2010, there's an email account created, John Skelton 1971 at yahoo.com under a specific IP address. November 6th, about a week later, a Yahoo email account was created under the name of Joanne_Taylor at yahoo.com under the same IP address. There's also an account created under Cafe Mom, Mom for Everything at the same time. November 6, 2010, John sends emails titled "Finished" to Tanya and states, I'm sorry, sometimes some of this is a little difficult to read. I can't take all the hurting you're doing to me. That was on November 6th. So another week later, John Skelton's email, the search conducts a search for poison and can wrap poison kill a person. Fast forwarding another 6 days, Tanya is contacted by the Mom for Everything under the Joanne Taylor email address on the website Cafe Mom, claiming to be Joanne Taylor. The next day, November 20th, John Skelton's laptop conducts the following Bing search in his search engine: how to break a neck, neck and spine, spinal cord, and cerebellum. And that was the last search conducted at 1735 hours. November 21st, the next day, Forensic Police Officer Hilliard was dispatched to a 911 call at 112 East Congress, which was where John resided, for a 7-year-old boy who claimed his father was missing. Next, we had November 22nd, the following day, Tanya's sons tell Tanya that John did advise the boys that Tanya was a sex offender. On November 25th, 2010, Tanya tells John there'll be no chance for reconciliation at that point. 2 days later, November 24th, John posts a Facebook message, "I love my wife very much, and may God and Tanya forgive me." Same day, approximately 3 hours later, a friend of John's, Herschel Ward, received a Facebook message from John saying, "I'm killing myself tonight, but right now I am fine." Later that same day, Tanya drops the boys off at her parents. Tanya goes to clean a house. John is scheduled to pick up the boys at 3 o'clock. This is the last time Tanya sees her children, sees the boys. November 24th, 2010, Herschel Ward again receives a message from John, which reads, "I was going to last week, but Tanya opened up and I was going to move back in. This weekend, the kids found out that Tanya was a sex offender and told her. Now Tanya thinks I told them to be hurtful and mean. She won't listen, and I can't take her silence again." The next day, November 25th, cell phone analysis reflects John's Skelton's target telephone remained in a geographic area consistent with his residence throughout the day. Same day, November 25th, Tanya spends Thanksgiving Day at her sister Tennille's house in Kunkel, Ohio. John's laptop did start using the internet November 25th between the hours of 1:38 and 4:04 p.m. November 25th, during roughly that same time frame, John did reference the Michigan Sex Offender Registry on the internet. Around again that same time frame, November 25th, the neighbor Adam Johnson and Chris Hawker see 2 children playing outside of the Skelton residence. So that was about 2:30 in the afternoon. On November 25th at about 4:15, John Skelton leaves a voicemail for John Kaselka. Kaselka reports hearing children's voices in the background during this phone call. November 26th at 01:37, Skelton logs into the internet and visits allrecipes.com, marriagetoday.org, and reads an article, "Our kids better off if we divorce." Then goes to Cafe Mom at approximately 1:41 a.m. and messages composed. Moving forward to November 26th at 0500 hours, John Skelton's phone was located approximately 2.3 miles from a Verizon site. 480 moved to sector 2 and 3 near Pioneer, Ohio. Again, previous to this, Skelton's phone was located 3.3 miles from the residence, which is indicative of the phone moving away from the residence. At approximately 5 a.m. on November 26th, Christy Schaefer and George Zubers drove by the Skelton house to see if John was up for Black Friday shopping, and his vehicle was not there, which is odd because at that point, his vehicle would usually be there at that time of the morning. And then just a few moments later, there was another cell phone ping. The cell phone was targeted between 2.2 and 3.7 miles from the Verizon cell tower near the Lazy River campground, and that was marked as a significant landmark in the area at that time.
Ready?
Okay, is there anything remarkable to you that you wanted to talk about with regard to this one first?
No, this is just, again, showing kind of when I first got the case, how I got to the point of getting myself prepared for what all had taken place during that previous 3 years.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Castleberry, if you can make him read all of them if you want to, but you can also stack them up over here. And if you give me a few minutes, I can get through them a little faster than
Sure.
he can read, unless you want to read them. It's up to you.
We would rather you read them, Judge.
Okay, I don't need, do you want them read into the record? I guess is the real question.
No.
Okay, all right. Ms. Stang, have you had an opportunity to review these?
I have not.
Oh, okay.
I can't see the witness, so I'm gonna move him back.
Okay.
He can read it to you.
Yeah, that's fine, especially if Ms. Stang needs to know what it's it says too.
Yep.
So, Mr. Brewer, or Lieutenant Brewer, you reviewed all these case files. You and the Michigan State Police compiled these timelines.
Correct.
We are going to allow the judge to read them on her own. Ms. Dane, you're welcome to read them as well. But essentially, what we have on these boards are what's been testified to in this trial thus far. And so we want to pick up with you on from the date you started compiling the timeline and you then actually went to meet with John Skelton.
Right.
Can you tell us about that first, sir?
So it took me several months to get this timeline created, to get my bearings, for lack of a better term, and to understand all the different nuances and facets of this investigation. Several months later, I believe it was in February, early 2014 is when I first sat down with John Skelton, introduced myself to him and explained that the Michigan State Police would now be the lead investigative agency moving forward in this case.
And what was one of your goals in that?
My goal was to develop a rapport with John. Obviously, I had not been involved with any of this prior. I had no knowledge of who John Skelton or Tanya or any of the boys were. I came into this from a very raw perspective of not knowing other than what might have been in the news briefly, but so I really wanted to try to get to understand John and know him. And just at that point, you know, we wanted to find the boys, and that's my main message to John. My main mission was to become allies with him and to try to get as much information from him that I could, so I could then do my job properly and try to find these boys for him.
What was his reaction when you tried to talk to him about the boys?
We would talk about everything under the sun, his family, the weather, sports, prison life. But if I ever directed the conversation toward why I was truly there or about the boys, he would shut down and would never give me a response. He would claim that everyone was out to get him. He didn't trust anyone, and that basically, essentially, he wasn't going to provide me with any information.
Did you ever go through the fact that you knew that all of his stories were lies?
Did explain to him that, you know, from my perspective, coming into this again from a very raw perspective, that everything that I had read just didn't make sense, and that from a lot of the investigators that I spent hours briefing and debriefing with to try to gain a better understanding of this case, that there wasn't one person that thought he was telling any sort of truth. And again, when I would ever confront him with anything that would make him feel uncomfortable, he would just shut down. I would explain to him time and time again that if his boys were out there, they could be in danger. If he gave them truly to a group that were strangers, that he has no idea what they could be going through, and that I was not here to try to keep Skelton in prison, keep John in prison, but to find the boys. And no matter how much I would plead with him or do my best to explain to him that I was not his enemy, I was an ally for him, he still would not shed any light as to what happened.
Now, part of this getting ready for these interviews, you interviewed Tanya.
Correct. We spent a lot of time with Tanya.
A lot of time with Tanya. You also interviewed John's family. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So what did you interview?
So the time his family lives in Jacksonville, the time his father, John.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville, Florida, yes, sir. He's now deceased, but at the time he was alive. So it was his father, his mother Roxanne, and his sister Lucinda were his three main family members in Jacksonville. They all lived in the same vicinity. So I did go there and speak to them on numerous occasions to try to get some insight as to, you know, what they thought happened, any information they would be willing to share, try to find out more about John's past, and maybe leading up to this thing that would be helpful. So yes, we spent a lot of time with them as well.
So it wasn't just one trip.
No, multiple.
Multiple trips over a 10-year period, 12-year period.
Yes, sir.
So it's fair to say you got to know his family fairly well.
Very well.
What did you ever learn from it?
My sense was that number one, I don't believe they had any knowledge of what John did. I believe that it's very hard for them to come to grips with the fact that their son probably killed their grandkids. I believe that they knew and they know that he did something horrible. But they just come up short of admitting that to me. They want to help, but they also don't want to get themselves in a situation where they're more on the side of the police than they are his son.
Okay. Now, you say, we know you had your first interview with Mr. Skelton. How many times, I mean, I know I'm not asking for an exact number, but how many interviews did you do with him?
At minimum half a dozen. There were times when we would correspond through, electronic things. If there was something I was following up with him quickly and I couldn't make the trip to the prison was, a good distance away from my current, my work site at the time. But there was contact with John dozens of times over the course of this, and now we're into the 12th year of me being involved.
Now, I want to refer you to your timeline. Could you go through your timeline of, now this is 2013
Correct.
forward.
So along with a lot of the investigative police reports that I obtained from this, there were also boxes and boxes of paper copy tips, leads that had come in. At the time, the FBI had a tip system electronically. I believe it was called Rapid Start. That also then transformed itself into another system. So there was also electronic copies of a lot of the duplicate tips. Typically, when you get a tip that comes in, it's a carbon charge copy. Whoever is the intake person of that tip would then take the tip on paper, give the investigator the carbon charge. They would then investigate that. When that tip was closed out, they'd marry the two forms up together, give it back to me, and then that tip would be closed. So it was a very monumental task to cross-reference both the electronic database along with the dozens of boxes of tips to find out what had been closed, what was still open. And so that took, in effect, several years to work through. We had several of us that were looking at those. Anything that looked like it had some investigative meat to it, they would give that to me and we determine if we needed to send people out for that. And so that was, honestly, it took a very, very long time to work through that methodically. And we did that, but it took a very long time.
And do you believe you tracked down any
Absolutely.
tip that
Anything that had
anything?
an investigative lead that looked even remotely legitimate, even to the point where we would get calls from, various psychics and mediums, things that sometimes were out there a little bit. Other times there was information relayed that seemed a little bit more specific. And for me to then allocate resources, whether it be an aviation unit, a dive team, a cadaver dog, state police has been excellent with giving me all the resources I would need, but I'd have to make the determination, is it worth, a lot of resources, time and money and all these things to put a group of people out investigating this tip. And if there was anything that was remotely legitimate, we would do that. And unfortunately, to this day, we've never found the boys.
So in all these tips that you investigated, and I assume we're talking hundreds, if not thousands. Is that right?
I would say into the thousands.
Okay. Any sign of life of the three kids?
No. We've had a few that stood out. And I referenced some of those on the timeline. There was 2015, there was a baseball that was found in near the Lazy River campground. And as I referenced earlier, that was a point where the cell phone pinged at. And so that was kind of found in a remote area, I believe, by a hiker or a hunter. And so that one sounded a little bit interesting. And we tested that for DNA. It came back, negative for the boys. We got another tip, I believe it was in 2016, 2017. Someone advised they believe they saw John Skelton's van in Fulton County, Ohio, near a body of water. The tip was that they saw the van. They believe it was on Black Friday, early morning. Not much to go on, but again, we saw it through. At that point, we had contacted Fulton County. They were very gracious and allowed the Michigan State Police underwater recovery unit, the Marine dive team, to come in, and we spent a full day there, all of our dive team members diving and dragging that pond for hours. And that led to nothing essentially. So we had things such as that would come up if there was something that in the hot zone, we call it, during that, from that Morenci to Lazy River, Kunkel, Pioneer, anything in that zone that came in around that time frame, we would investigate fully.
Now, there came a time where there were some bones
Correct.
discovered in, I believe, was it Montana?
Yes. In 2018, we had received some information that there was a residence in Montana. I believe they had conducted some type of search warrant. The local authorities had done it out there. And there was a box of bones that was found in an outdoor outbuilding, like a garage or a shed. The initial finding from, it wasn't an anthropologist, but it was someone with a little bit of expertise into human bones, had advised that there were 3 distinct individuals that were identified in this box of bones, and they all appeared to be under the age of 10 years old, I believe. And so once that information started hitting law enforcement channels, it made its way to me pretty quickly, because obviously we had 3 missing boys under that age. And we had immediately contacted local authorities to go out there and try to get ourselves into this. Again, they were very gracious to allow us to become part of their investigation. We conducted some interviews with neighbors and with some of the folks involved in that community. In the meantime, those bones were then, I believe, sent to University of North Texas, which houses the DNA database, and the true experts are there. And then over the course of just, I believe it was a couple of months. So we had been investigating this while the bones were being examined, assuming that maybe these were the boys, and let's go all in. We received information within a couple of months that these bones are actually determined to be prehistoric, which is they consider prehistoric anything over 100 years old. And so at that point, we were able to close this tip out because obviously they were not our boys.
In 2018, did you also have a chance to have a talk with John Skelton about an individual by the name of Moses Gingrich?
Yes, this interview with John was probably the most significant interaction I had had with him in the 5 years prior, leading up to this, with my involvement. I had an interview scheduled with John at the prison. I believe the previous interviews before that, he had the only time he had mentioned the boys and with Tanya is that he wasn't going to, again, talk to me about it because his boys were never going to be safe if they were going to come back to Tanya. And so I had talked to him, advising him that if we could make arrangements for maybe his parents to have the boys, or, you know, this court system, however that would work, you know, would that lead him to giving us some information? Again, he didn't really respond with much. He kind of shut down once I actually offered him some solutions and some help with that small piece of information. So leading up to this interview with John, I began talking to him and just, again, started the interview with, hey, you know, let's really examine if we can get these kids somewhere else. What are we going to do? He seemed to be fairly comfortable with that. We had a pretty good rapport. It was never adversarial. He would never really give me information, but we had a pretty good relationship, actually. And as we were talking and discussing various things, he kind of got quiet and he said, well, I want to tell you something. And he said, you need to find Mose. And of course, I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, well, what's Mose? Who's Mose? And he said, Moses Gingrich. Again, I asked him who Moses Gingrich was. And he had said, well, the group or the individual who took his boys showed him a picture of Mose and said, this is who you contact if you want to get your boys back. And of course, for him to tell me something like that was so far out of the ordinary. He never would even let me talk about the boys and what sports they like to play or what TV shows they like to watch, let alone something investigatively that would shed some light on this case. So that was fairly fascinating to me that he decided at this point in time to give me a name at least. He didn't say much more than that, other than the group told him. He did said that he said the group gave him a photograph of Mr. Gingrich, but he burned it or he lost it during the know, the 2 days around Thanksgiving and Black Friday, but that's who I needed to contact. So once the interview was concluded, immediately I got to work on Moses Gingrich. After just a few minutes of searching, found that he, being Moses, was a former TV personality on an Amish TV show. I don't actually recall the name of the show at this second, but essentially Moses was on a show relating to the Amish. He was a former Amish person, and during that time, he and his wife were getting out of the Amish community, and they were setting up some sort of halfway house or a system set up to where other kids and people who wanted to remove themselves from the Amish community, they would assist them on how to use a cell phone, how to use the internet, how to drive a car, those types of things. So that's Moses Gingrich. That's who he was.
So he would help people leave, not go in.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we found, again, that was, a simple internet search, honestly, we found Moses quickly and were able to determine that's a little bit of his background. I was able to track down a phone number for Mr. Gingrich and call him. I believe he was from Arkansas at the time, currently working as a truck driver. He was out of the TV realm at that point. And so I explained why wanted to reach out to him. Of course, I think he actually was driving at the time and, had to pull his semi over to digest, the magnitude of the conversation. And it was difficult initially because a lot of the information that I wanted to share with him, it's difficult to do that over the phone, especially something as sensitive as this. I'd rather see him face to face. But just due to the distance, I did need to disclose a little bit. And that led us to asking him if he'd be willing to come to Michigan and to do an interview with us and to possibly even get in front of John and to help us find these boys. Moses was 100% on board. He wanted to, number one, help us if there was something he did to help 3 missing children, but to also find out why this person in Michigan in prison for parental kidnapping and child endangerment would be mentioning his name. And so literally within just a few short months of John mentioning Moses to me, we had flown Moses to Michigan and conducted an interview with him, and then I went from there.
Okay, what happened next?
So next, Moses again agreed to meet with John. We cleared this with Michigan Department of Corrections. They said, absolutely, do what you need to do. And so I went back. John was kind of confused because usually, every few months he'd get used to me showing up, and this was probably off timing just a little bit. And so I spoke with John and I said, hey, we've got some, really, really good news. I said that, we were able to track down Moses Gingrich. And his response, it just appeared 100% fake initially. He was like, well, did he find the boys? And it's not the kind of response that, yeah, if we just found your boys, you probably would be a little bit more excited or have a little bit more of a reaction than some fake rehearsed response. I said, no, we haven't found the boys, but he actually, agreed to talk to you, and we have him here today. And that's when I brought Moses in to the room. John's reaction to this was a little bit just unbelievable to me. He became white as a ghost. He couldn't formulate a sentence. He started visibly shaking, almost to the point I thought he might have a medical response. Moses sat down, introduced himself to John, and it took a moment for John to realize kind of what was going on. John never thought in a million years we would, what I believe, call his bluff on this. Again, Moses introduced himself to John and just said, this is why I'm here. This detective explained to me that you mentioned my name, and I just want to know, what I can do to help. How did you hear my name? And over the course of a few minutes, John was able to compose himself a little bit. Basically told Moses the same thing, that this group gave him this photograph because I did kind of recognize you when you walked in. And again, John gave no other information. He had nothing to say. He had no excitement, no elation that we found this person who he initially told me would help us find the boys. He looked scared to death. So for me, it was, and I've always I had my own beliefs on what happened to the boys, but, was this the time that maybe John was actually giving me something that would be helpful? And for him to show in a complete opposite reaction to what he should be showing if we found the one person that can find the boys, it was just very enlightening to me as to his true involvement with whatever horrible it was that he did.
So you have Moses Gingrich there. He ask any questions about where the boys are to Moses?
No, I believe he explained the story to Moses about this group, giving him a photograph of Moses. And then Moses countered that with, well, that's very odd because I was Amish, but I've spent a lot of years trying to help people get out of that lifestyle. And so there would be no reason for someone to think I'm trying to hide or be a part of 3 boys going missing. And in talking with Moses leading up to this and then even afterwards, because I had mentioned to him this underground group and things that the Amish had been mentioned a few times about being involved. And after talking to Moses, being a true expert in that arena, it was so clear that the Amish would want nothing to do with the media attention, the law enforcement attention. They're a very, very helpful community. They would want to help anyone, but they are the links that they would have to go through in their community to hide 3 boys for a decade plus would just be unheard of. And he said, I don't even think they could pull it off. And to hear that from someone that not only knew about the Amish, but was and lived it, was just very, very insightful.
Did you confront John with the fact that he lied again?
Absolutely. And anytime I had a stern conversation with John about the boys, he would just shut down. He gave me no traction or no ability to, other than just to talk and to let him know that this was kind of the last straw. This was it. You've told lies from start to finish. And then you went 5 or 6 years silent with not saying anything. And the one time that you decided to give us some information, it again is a distraction technique to throw us off and to waste more of my time. To waste Mr. Gingrich's time and all the resources that were put into flying him up from Arkansas and meeting with him, staying in hotels, airline flights, all these things that go into something like that. It was just him wasting our time.
Just a game.
Just a game.
Now, you confronted Mr. Skelton multiple times about the different stories he's told. And each time you informed him that he was lying. Is that right?
Yes.
Any question in your mind that John Skelton's a liar?
100% he's a liar.
Now, in 2022, there was another tip.
Yes.
What was that?
So in 2022, I received a phone call. Again, it came through the tip avenues. It was a reference to a kid out in California. I believe he was 21, 22 in that age range. The tip information said there's a kid from California. His name is Alex, and he believes he is Alexander Skelton. And so when I read the information, there wasn't a lot there, but I knew the age was going to be similar. And eventually there was a photograph attached to this individual. And I mean, he was a white Caucasian male that, it's just hard to tell what the boys would look like, what Alex would have looked like now. But we had a really difficult time getting a hold of him. He gave us a cell phone number, but he was in between residences. And so we were finally able to talk to him. Within just a couple of moments, it was very clear to me that this individual was very mentally disturbed. He even said so. He admitted to that he had quite the life growing up. He had no idea who he was. He was fascinated with missing persons, TV shows and articles and media because of the fact that maybe he would eventually find who he was one day. He came across this case and he had convinced himself that he was Alexander Skelton. I believe it was out in San Bernardino, California. So I initially had reached out to the detective bureau out there. Again, very gracious to assist, and was able to set up a meeting between this Alex and detectives from that department. They were able to do a DNA swab, conduct an interview with him. They also confirmed that I believe he even had a mental order in their police computer system for this individual. And, after a few short weeks when that DNA test came back, it was found he was not Alexander Skell.
Now, throughout all these years that you've been investigating this case, you have had age progression photos made, correct? And you have distributed these nationally, not just local.
Correct. So along with the actual boots on the ground police work, knocking on doors, conducting interviews, we have also been heavily invested with the media. We have, we've gotten calls and done interviews with Court TV, John Walsh, Nancy Grace, multiple different CNN shows. I believe there was a missing Fox News show that we had done at one point. Channel 4 in Detroit ended up doing a 10-series podcast, fully invested into this case. A lot of detail, a lot of information. That show actually hit some of the national outlets and won a bunch of awards, just to show that this has hit nationally. We've not just hit Lenawee County News, we have hit, the national outlets. And with that, we have, again, other than getting a few tips here and there that ended up amounting to nothing, even with hitting a national stage, we have yet to receive anything that has led to us finding the boys alive.
In those media investigations that were taking place, there was also one that included the Amish, wasn't there?
I believe so.
And nothing.
No.
Nothing.
No. Again, the Amish, the few times we've contacted them, they have not enjoyed talking to us. It's just not in their wheelhouse to do so. It's not part of their belief system. And there's never been one person in the Amish community or that have connections into the Amish community that can get us into those resources that have even giving us any hint that this would be something that they would do.
So in 12 years, any indication that these children are alive? Is there any doubt in your mind that John Skell killed these 3 children?
No doubt whatsoever.
And is there any doubt in your mind that they were killed on or about November 26, 2010?
No doubt in my mind.
One thing, because we didn't go through the timeline, I would like to mark it and enter it as an exhibit. Would we call it petitioners exhibit 1?
Sure. So there's 4 total.
Yes.
Any objections?
No objections.
Very well. We'll receive all 4 as exhibit 1.
And I would ask that it be published to the court.
Yes, absolutely.
No further
I'll read
questions?
them later if that's okay with you.
That's fine. No further questions, Your Honor.
Let's see.
Just to kind of summarize everything, can you name all of the law enforcement agencies that you're aware of that have played a part in this case?
No. I know initially we had the FBI, all the sheriff's departments locally. We had Fulton, Williams County, Ohio, Lucas County, Michigan State Police, but the Michigan State Police has 29 police posts. I would not be surprised if every post in some way is this with a detective knocking on a door, especially during the Joel and Taylor search. Multiple dozens of townships and counties and municipalities in Ohio. And then I couldn't even put a number on how many nationally have assisted, and we've sent tips out too that have helped us, but I don't think I'd be exaggerating when I'd say well over 100.
Okay, so is it safe to say then that law enforcement had every support that they would have needed to attempt to investigate this case?
The FBI has been phenomenal. They've opened up their books and their resources to us. The Michigan State Police has given me everything that I could have asked for as the lead investigator. There hasn't been anyone we've talked to, once they understand the magnitude of this case, that has not fully given us their support.
Right. And you testified earlier to John's cell phone data showing that he was traveling on the early morning of November 26th from between Michigan to Ohio and then back to Michigan, correct? Okay, and based on your professional opinion, what do you believe John was doing during that time period?
My initial thought, or my thoughts, are probably that as the phone started getting into Ohio, I think we had a good track on the phone for about a half hour. Whatever it was he did at that point, he probably just shut the phone off to avoid detection. And then once he got back home and knew he had his bearings again, the phone came back on.
Okay, so If you know, what was the length of time that the phone was off to when he was back home?
I believe we had the lower hour and a half.
Okay, so is it safe to say he couldn't have really gone that far in that time period?
Correct. I mean, he could also shut the phone off and just driven, a totally different direction, but either way, he only had probably time to drive at the most 60 to 70 miles back.
And when you reviewed the evidence regarding the Skelton home that was searched on November 26th of 2010, what were your initial thoughts on what had occurred in that home?
So I remember one of the first things that I saw was the rope that he allegedly tried to hang himself with. When I looked at that, I didn't laugh because it was funny. It was almost humorous that he would claim that, because it was, I had called it a shoestring. I've always kind of referred to it as that because it was so thin. Anyone in their right mind that would try to hang themselves from a very weak banister would not use that, in my opinion. So that was one of the first things that it stuck out to me. Also thought I was very curious about all the different tie straps and tie downs that were cut. It just seemed very odd. I mean, the house was, from the photo, I was not there at that time, but I saw, I poured over the photos. The house was just destroyed. He didn't want Tanya to get anything out of it, so he just destroyed everything. But the tie down straps that were cut, obviously, to me was very, very interesting. One of the other things that I thought was very odd was in one of the bedrooms, or one of the areas where there were some mattresses. There were at least one or two that had, a sheet on them and had stuffed animals and toys that seemed normal. And then there was one that was completely bare, appearing to me as if something on that bed was recently removed, as to why it wouldn't look like the other two. So those are some of the things that really stuck out, along with the fact that, again, he just destroyed everything. If he pulled off this heist of the century and got his kids safe with this group to keep him away from Tanya, he should be the happiest guy in the world, because his kids are now safe. Why does he have to try to kill himself? Why does he have to destroy everything? And why does he have to leave a suicide note? It just doesn't. His story and the facts of it don't make sense.
Okay, and you just stated that you believe he destroyed everything in the home so that Tanya couldn't get any of it. Do you believe that's the same thing that he did with the boys, basically?
Yes.
And you mentioned testing a baseball in 2015 that was found in Ohio for DNA, and said it came back that it was not the DNA of any of the Skelton boys. So you actually have DNA then from the boys?
Yes.
Okay. And has that DNA ever been imputed into any databases?
Yes.
What databases?
The University of North Texas houses that database. It's called NamUs. And that database is constantly updated. There's constant DNA information being inputted in that. And to my understanding, there's kind of a revolving stuff that's going on behind the scenes all the time, where if there's a missing persons found in Oregon, in that database, that's entered into NamUs, and if it were to hit one of the Skelton boys, we would get notified of that. So there's checks continuously going on all the time with that National Clearinghouse.
Okay. And this underground group that John alleges he gave the children to, do you know what was the name of the group that John was alleging?
He said Underground Sanctuary.
Okay. And did John ever tell you or anybody else that you would have reviewed those records of how he allegedly found this group?
Out of all the stories he told, he met some folks at the side of the road that he was helping change a tire, and within a few short minutes trusted him enough to tell him his whole life story, and that he wanted to hide his kids, and that they happened just to be part of the Underground Sanctuary. And within a couple of weeks, he sent them off to them.
Were there any ever statements made with regards to any business cards being given to him or anything like that?
There was some secret envelopes and secret numbers that John allegedly was given, that he even said something along the lines of, at some point he could connect these numbers to different newspaper articles that would come out that would then have some type of code that he would understand of where to find the boys. It was just way out there. It didn't make any sense. And he had indicated that either he had burned those secret envelopes or that the police took them during the search warrant. And to my knowledge, there was none of that secret numbers envelopes were ever found when we obtained the property and the evidence.
Okay. And aside from this case, have you ever investigated any other potential homicide cases?
Yes.
Okay, and in any of those other cases, were there ever any claims made, like the ones that John just made that you just testified to that ended up coming out to be true?
Nothing even close.
In your professional opinion, is it likely that John Skelton could have found this alleged underground sanctuary group, but none of the law enforcement agencies, which you just testified, there were hundreds, none of them found it, but John Skelton did?
That's absolutely absurd.
Okay. And with regards to Moses Gingrich, isn't it true that the TV show he was actually on was one that was airing within the prison where John was being housed?
Yes, I believe it's either Learning Channel or Discovery Channel or something that he would have had access to that.
Okay, so you believe that's at the point when he came up with that story that he had probably seen that on the TV?
It's not a stretch to say that John saw one of his shows in prison and then that planted a seed in his mind to throw that to us as a distraction.
Okay, and during the investigation, were there ever any data analyst searches conducted by the Michigan State Police? Okay, and was there one specific person that was dedicated to doing those searches?
Yes.
Who was
Well,
that?
throughout the years, we've had several that have been involved helping us in different things. More recently, we've got a cold case analyst. Her name's Kelly Hodges, that has kind of gotten us up to speed. Done searches from, initially from 2010 all the way up to present day. And she can go into more of that, what her job is with that.
Okay, are you aware of if the boys had passports?
I do not believe that they did.
Okay. Prior to you coming onto this case, when you were reviewing the evidence, you were made aware of the comments made by John to the FBI agents with regards to the children potentially being in an old schoolhouse in Ohio or potentially being in a dumpster. You're aware of those?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that John told the authorities, even prior to telling the authorities to search those places, that the children were actually safe with people like Joey and Taylor? Okay, so did it make any sense to you when you were reviewing that John would tell authorities to search those places if he believed the children were safe?
No, the context made perfect sense because all he's done is lie, but what came out of his mouth was completely contradictory from what he had said weeks before.
Okay. And you testified earlier that age progressions of the children had been done. Are you aware of how many of those have been done?
I believe they do them every other year. We had not done them recently. I think we had at least 3 or 4 sets, so it would have encompassed 8 years or so of the time they'd be missing.
Okay, and when those age progressions were released, did the Michigan State Police receive any tips with regards to those updated pictures?
We would receive tips. A lot of times we would receive tips when we put things out there, but of late it's really been from more of like the psychics and the mediums. Nothing that's, hey, I believe these boys were seen in Columbus, Ohio at a coffee shop, nothing like that we could actually go out and investigate. So yeah, nothing's really panned out from those.
Okay. Is there any doubt in your mind that these 3 boys are deceased and have been since November 26th of 2010? And you already testified about some of your investigation and the findings that led you to this conclusion, but is it accurate to state that there's way more evidence and information than what you just sat here and testified to today that leads you to believe that? Okay. And is there any of that other evidence that you haven't had a chance to testify to today that you think is relevant enough to this case of finding that the children are deceased that you would like to testify to?
No, I think we've covered the highlights for sure.
Okay, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Any reason we should not thank and excuse this witness?
Please do.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you so much for your time and your testimony. You'll be on your way.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Mr. Kesselman.
We would call Kelly Hodges. We need it. These are all entered.
Yes, they are.
So I'm gonna leave them with the court and you'll just let me know when you're done.
Sure. Yep. something to be a recess before we go any further or a break?
Karen, I would say let's do this witness and then we could take a recess for the next one. She's just right down the hall. She'll be right here.
You can come up here. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? There's a step here.
Good afternoon. Would you like to state and spell your name for the record?
Kelly Hodges, Kelly, H-U-G-E-S.
Thank you. Mr. Casper.
Thank you, Aaron. Ms. Hodges, where are you employed?
Michigan State Police,
And how long have you been with the Michigan State Police?
about 4 years.
What is your job there?
I'm a criminal intelligence analyst and I'm assigned to the cold case unit.
What kind of things do you do?
Criminal intelligence analysts provide case support for investigators. We do everything from attempt to locate person workups, proof of life checks, cell phone analysis, and other special requests.
Can you tuck up just a little closer to those microphones? Thank you. That's perfect.
So you had some training in doing this. Could you tell us about that?
Yep, I have received about 7 years of training in different departments as well. I've done local and state different databases through law enforcement trainings. I've been through some government trainings as well and specialized trainings with major case investigations, narcotics, and other additional trainings.
So how did you become involved with the Skelton case?
I was asked in the summer of 2024 to do a proof of life check for the 3 boys.
Okay. What is that? What is a proof of life check?
A proof of life check is a verification process that we have to see if individuals are still alive. In those checks, we go through some different databases. Some of those databases include law enforcement databases, commercial databases, and federal government databases.
So I know you just named a few, but how many are there? I mean, and you don't have to be exact, but are we talking 10, 20, 100?
I checked about 20 different databases that we have access to at the state police.
So you looked at 20 different databases in doing a proof of life check.
Yes.
What kind of things are you looking for?
We're looking for any indication that they are alive, whether that's hitting on their social security number, any arrest records, any warrants, any traffic stops, anything like that.
What'd you find out?
Not much.
Okay.
My searches indicated nothing, just the original case report.
So there was proof of life before November 26, 2010.
Correct.
And there's been no proof of life since November 26, 2010.
Correct.
There's nothing that you found that would show that any of these 3 boys are alive. I have no further questions at this time.
When was the most recent search for life performed?
My last proof of life search was, I believe, in August of 2024.
Okay, and nothing was found at that point? Okay. And do those search of life searches actually look into like social media platforms?
Yes.
Okay. What about phone records? Okay. Do those also look into the NamUs database?
Yes.
Okay. Have you used the age progression photos as part of those searches as well?
Yep, I actually did facial recognition and I did that through Michigan State Police and then all the other states that participate in that. And I used both the original photos and the age progressed photos.
Okay, and for those, the facial recognition, is that used at places like the airports and things like that?
I cannot confirm. I'm not sure how that works, but it does check a variety of different sources.
Okay. Is there anything else that you haven't testified to today that you think is relevant to add?
I did check federal databases, and I did not see anything. A lot of those databases do check interstate records. Some of them are also located at different parts of the country. So like near the southern border of Texas, we had a very big search throughout the United States and we did not find anything.
Okay, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Any reason we should not thank and excuse Ms. Hodges?
Please do so.
Yes.
Thank you for your time and your testimony.